most when we worship, understand this. I feel something coming out of me in this. I feel in our effort to be where God wants us to be, God will help us believe us, right? So this need is incredible effort. Early Sunday morning, and I'm excited. I had an opportunity to speak at Stephen's Hall. So to Doc.
What's up?
Doc, did you come from Philly?
I did. I did.
Doc, she's working on a piece here. This will get down.
I'll take it.
Come on, Doc.
Yes. Perfect. All right.
Also want to say welcome. We're so honored and happy to be back here. We love coming here. We love your smiling faces, beautiful earrings. We're always feeling welcome and at home here. Yeah. Your fashions always on point. And so, BlackSpace, as the Rev so beautifully introduced us, we're really here to help each other think about how we might re-envision this space, and not only the spatial elements of the church, but also the community, the dynamics between people that are going to lead us into your next phase. And so a lot of what we bring, just to reintroduce ourselves, is we're organizing Black urbanists. So people like you'll hear from today, architects, urban planners, artists, policy folks, community developers of all sorts. We unite together to create social and spatial change in and with Black communities, like this beautiful community of Imani that we've gotten to know over more than a year now in conversations. And so just to reground us in that, we're in this with you. And I think you've heard that sentiment from me over the many, times we've had together. We're still committed to that. And still committed to this process. And at the end, I'll talk about what the next steps are, because we are heading on the, we've done a lot of work together so far. And in November, we'll do our final kind of presentation and share out of what we've learned and what you all will, you all can move into the next phases with. And I'm here with Denicia today, and also Alicia is our virtual magic fingers from Brooklyn. We'll make their faces bigger so you'll be able to see everyone a little more clearly. This is our first time trying to tech, so thank you with your patience with our projector and our sound and everything. And you may hear things going off. We're like running on multiple devices, but it's up. We're up and running. We're here. So we're just, again, glad to be here. The way today will kind of move is that we're actually all going to stay in the same space today. We're going to hear from 4 speakers who Denicia will kind of make sure they introduce themselves. And then Denicia and I will ask them questions that we think are questions that bring out their expertise. We can select with these folks to be really addressing some of the things we've listened and learned from you so far. And we also, so we'll be asking questions just to get the kind of discussion going, but we also want you to, if something sparks your interest or you want to hear something further, then you can also feel free to ask questions as well. We want it to feel discussion oriented, so don't be shy in like raising your hand or sharing. And we'll use this as a microphone so the speakers can hear your voice. And there's something, and you might hear that going off just because this is all connected to my phone. So there's something else I wanted to say. The point and objective of today is really to spark new ideas. The speakers they have done project and work in all sorts of settings across the country. And we want you to hear, oh, that might work here at Imani, or, oh, I never thought about it that way. Let me try to think, could that work for us? Or is there some lesson that I can take away about Imani's next chapter from the stories we'll hear today? So it's mostly to just kind of spark imagination, but also it's a little bit of education around what other people are doing around Black church design, community development. So that's really the point. So there's no like assignments, but just to be open, keep your minds open and ask questions. And if you need clarity on anything, you ask, feel free to ask these wonderful folks on the phone.
I'm going to give just a very brief introduction of who they are. I have to read their bios and share about themselves. But just so you have their names in mind already. So we have DeMar Matthews, who is an architect based out of Los Angeles. He's doing really
Excuse me, Denicia. Sorry. Could you speak louder so we can hear?
Oh, you need this.
Thank you.
You're not the first. Get down this path and hire this. So I'm we're stepping into the spirit. So
That's a wonderful way to put it, Rev. So again, DeMar Matthews is an architect based out of Los Angeles. He's right here doing wonderful work around Black architecture specifically, right? So thinking about how our heritage, how our symbology plays a role in our built environment, doing beautiful, beautiful work. We also have Reverend Dr. James Setta Ferguson, who is a pastor at St. Peter United Church of Christ and has done some marvelous, like radical work around rethinking historical spaces to fit modern congregational needs. Dr. Olin Dotson, who is the department chair of architecture at Ball State University. He's actually my mentor. And he's just brilliant, has done work all over the country, again, looking at Black architecture, but also looking at sustainable architecture, looking at urban planning and how places just remain over time. And then Sarah Timberlake, who is an architect with Quinn Evans and has done remarkable work specifically around Black church iconography, Black church symbology, Black church topology, right? So really thinking about what it means to be a proud Black congregation and how that finds its space in community. So each of these people has, as you can tell, robust knowledge and information to share, and they are all just so gracious with that information. So I'm really excited for them to be here with you today. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Alicia, so that they can introduce themselves and share their stories.
Hi, everybody. I wish I could be there. But I'm just gonna, whoever wants to go first, if you could introduce yourself. We're gonna start off by saying, like we talked earlier, who we are, the work, and your favorite BlackSpace. James said it, you're on mute.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I am Reverend Dr. James Ella Ferguson. I'm senior pastor of St. Peter's United Church of Christ and have been in that role for 15 years now. I am also the co-founder and president and CEO of Molo Village Community Development Corp, which began in 2011 and was birthed in St. Peter's United Church of Christ. The picture that you're looking at is our historical building located in the Russell community in the West End of Louisville, a community that has 9,300 residents, of which also house the largest housing partnership are projects in the state of Kentucky with some 843 units, where 91% of our community is 91% is African American and 61% lives under the poverty line. Pre-COVID, we were serving approximately 1,000 people a week in various ministries. And because of the amount of people coming through our church, which is a historic church that needed a lot of repair, we had to relocate to a temporary site. And when we moved to that temporary site in 2014, it gave us an opportunity to envision what we were going to do with the property. If you can advance the slide, this is the front of this historic building. And so you will see on the left-hand side, there is a parking lot, and you just saw in the first slide the west view of this church. And then on the right side is the east parking lot. And this is where we put our newest endeavor, which is the Village of West Jefferson. If you can advance the slide, this is what we created on the church proper, the building that has the awnings to the left-hand side. And so this is an example of what we wanted to become in our community. I started at St. Peter's in 2006 as a spiritual developer, but I ended up in 2021 as not only a spiritual developer, but also a community developer. And so I want to end with my favorite space, and I guess I'm a little prejudiced with this, is the church space. And I choose the church space because we as the church, many times in the historic church, have had to be very creative, and we use what we have available to us in order to do the ministry and mission that is needed many times in the underserved communities. And so for me, it is the church.
Thank you so much. Olin? Yeah, all right, great.
Oh, okay, great. I'll follow up. What are we seeing now? Are we seeing me?
You're good. We see the presentation.
Okay, great. Yes, my name is Dr. Olin Dodson. And as indicated, I'm a professor and chair of the architecture department at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana. I've been there for about 23 years, and I'm really honored to be referred to as a mentor by this system. I grew up in Indianapolis and in Tulsa. My mother was from Tulsa and my father was from Mississippi, and they came together in Indianapolis. And for those of you who know, because we just, I would say, celebrated the 100th anniversary of the massacre that occurred in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921. And at the same time, while we were digging out of this space, our church had burned down in Indianapolis, the church that I grew up in. It was called Simpson Methodist Episcopal Church. And this is after they reopened it on that same year in 1921, 600 miles away in Tulsa, in Indianapolis. This was the church, and it still stands. But because of an interstate and other changes in demographics, we moved to this church. And I have to say, I don't know if I can compete with Reverend Dr. Ferguson, but my mother was the organist at this church. She developed her skills in Tulsa on Greenwood, and she was the organist of this church. And in September of 1963, this month, in 1963, she went into labor while she was playing the organ. I was tired of being in there, so they had to rush me down the street to St. Vincent's Hospital. So I grew up in this church, and today, this morning, I have a presentation to the church about a new entry that we're proposing, as you can see in this rendering. And this is the stained glass. We're actually doing a different kind of stained glass with LED technology, and we're acknowledging our past, showing the different churches that we were in. And this is going to be a drawing inside the stained glass with the United Methodist Church symbol on top. So I'm going to be presenting this this morning in less than an hour. And so I was asked about favorite Black spaces, and honestly, I don't really have one that I've thought about it for a long time. And that's a struggle because we live and reside in anti-Black space wherever we go. So my favorite Black space is wherever I am.
Yes.
Wherever I am at this particular moment, because we have to, and we've been doing it with our churches in particular, making a way out of no way. This is what we do. And this is a view of one of my favorite spaces, if I have one, from the front porch at the Equal Justice Initiative Memorial to Peace and Justice. This is the building that we designed for Brian Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative across the street from the memorial itself. So if you have been there and you go to the auditorium where we're making a way out of no way, that is the kind of place that we celebrate. We celebrate the memory of those who have been subjected to the oppression that this nation has given us for the last 400 years. I'm continuing to work with various groups in Montgomery and all over the country. This is a civil rights park that we're doing for the Southern Poverty Law Center. And again, we're making a way out of no way. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we move to Damar? Would that be okay? And then Sarah?
Hey everyone, my name is Damar. Thank you for having me. To start, I am born and raised in Moreno Valley, California. Did my undergrad out at Lincoln University at the first historically Black college, and have been principal and founder of my own design studio, All Top Design, for the last almost 3 years now. I've shared my screen so you can check out some work, and hopefully I shared the correct screen. Okay, can everybody see my screen okay?
And Damar,
Okay.
I want to check in with everybody. Is everyone able to hear Damar? Okay, great.
And so my work is very much focused on the Black aesthetic and understanding and developing an architecture that speaks directly to our culture. So in school, in architecture school, and I'm a pretty recent graduate. I went 3 years and didn't really see any projects or buildings that were meant to represent us and celebrate us. So I was just on the hunt for that. And ever since my thesis during school, this has kind of been what my design studio is focused on. So here you're looking at a project that is currently happening at Watts, where we raised some money, enough to build a new maker space and ADU, which is just a second house on a unit, and then the redesign and addition of, the remodel and redesign of an existing shop and house on site. So here you'll see us looking and celebrating things like dance, hair, hairstyles, waves, braids, and etc. And I was looking at how can we superimpose those patterns that we're very used to make the exterior or the facade of a home look and feel like us. So this right here is getting built in Watts, directly next to the Watts Towers out here in California. Hopefully we'll see this in the next 6 months or so. And favorite BlackSpace, probably gonna have to say my mom's house. Yeah, probably gonna be my mom's house. And I think that's everything for me, but looking forward to continuing conversation, and I'm very thankful for you all having me.
I just want to give a bit of grace to the space before we get to Sarah. Everyone is in another place, as you can see, in a different time zone. Yes. And also acknowledge quite early to be.
Awesome. Hopefully, there are a lot of really great kind of presentations and talking about self that people were sharing. So hopefully I can follow up with that. As I was mentioned earlier, my name is Sarah Timberlake. I'm currently a designer at Quinn Evans. It's an architecture firm that we do a lot of adaptive reuse, historic preservation, works for the National Registry of Historic Places, and also some new construction. So in my profession, in my day-to-day, those are the type of projects that I'm working on, whether they're older federal buildings or where I am, which is based in Detroit, Michigan, breathing new life into a lot of different old buildings in and around the city. And one of the projects that I've actually been working on currently, if you're familiar with the Detroit scene, Ford Motor Company recently purchased the Michigan Central Station, which was this beautiful like Art Deco train station from the 30s, 40s that eventually was closed down and many times was a symbol of Detroit's decline. But now, as it's once again getting new life breathed into it, it's a symbol of kind of like the building up of Detroit and how different industries and different people are coming back to the city. So it's been really exciting to get to touch that project for a little bit. But maybe relative to this conversation, in addition to my kind of professional work in architecture, I've also done some research talking about the Black church. And I'm trying to be as brief as possible because I can easily give a 90-minute presentation, and I have before about this topic, but I think the short of it is there are many times in architecture where when there are conversations about church space, it's often about like these beautiful Catholic structures or buildings that were built like these modernist architectural buildings in like the middle of the 1900s, which are beautiful buildings, and I think they have their place in architectural history, but given that architecture is a pretty white male field currently, and only 2% of licensed architects in the US are Black, there are many people that are not thinking about Black space. They're not thinking about how are Black people using space. And there are many times that even in the history of the Black church, and I would say across the diaspora, but definitely specifically in the US, there are ways that like the Black church has used space in such unique and layered ways. So part of my research, called it Call and Response, was trying to make explicit some of those different things about what makes the Black church unique from an architecture perspective. So thinking about different typologies of buildings. So in a period of time, what type of building was more, or what type of space was used more? To give like a super high level, speaking, at least in the American context, when talking about in the Black church, there's a lot of it that in the times of like enslavement started from in like a protected hidden place in those hush harbors in the forests, worshiping in a Black space separate from where some of the other people who were oppressing them were worshiping. And then as there's a lot of movement of the Great Migration, as you have more African Americans moving to different cities and different places in the US, then you have us as Black people once again making a way out of no way, taking those storefronts and taking those different buildings and turning factories and those things into church spaces. And there's a lot of different evolution of spaces that I can talk about. But basically my research is kind of looking at what time in history was the Black church in and what type of space was used at that time. And then also thinking about in our current moment in our, especially kind of like in a post-COVID world, what is like the next typology or the next move for the Black church. And so these tenets I have over here, hopefully you've read them while they're on the screen. I don't really have to, hopefully I won't go through it, but once again, give me like 90 minutes in a PowerPoint, I would gladly go over this. So that's just a little bit of my research.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Sarah, can you hear me? Do
Yes.
you mind reading them? Actually, we're having low visibility, so just rote reading is fine for us to digest them.
Awesome. Yeah. So these 5 tenets of Black church design, and even as I share them, just a little bit of context, some of these things you may notice that it's not unique to a church of any other demographic. And some of these things are very unique to the Black church. But just for some of these spaces, to read them off, one tenet is that the church must respond to the street edge, to respond to the current moment, respond to the people. And also the church must use lights and passive design for gathering spaces. Also that the church must be layered. That can be layered in terms of what spaces are next to each other. That could be layered even in terms of texture and facade and materials. It can be layered in terms of programming and how the church is used. The fourth one being the church must be intentional about the procession. There are many times that the aisleway in the sanctuary is a very important space, and even like the pulpit is like a very important spatial part of the church. And I think there are many things in many different Black church traditions you see of how we really think about procession or how we enter the space or who is seen or who is visible there. And then lastly, the church must have a clear ceremonial threshold, that there is, once again, that may be just like a visual of what kind of defines this as like the physical space, whether for worship, for gathering, for different events, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully that gives a short little overview. And like I said, I could easily talk about this for a very long time. So I'd love to talk about it more at length. Outside of my professional work in architecture, I'm also very involved in my local church. My church first started as a small group, which in our church family, we call them life groups. So it first started as a life group that was based out of our Ann Arbor church. If you're not familiar with Michigan, Ann Arbor is a college town where University of Michigan is. It's 45 minutes from Detroit. So there's a Detroit Bible study that started back in 2012. And then around 2017, 2018, we felt, I think this small group should become a church. So a church was planted in 2018 from our Ann Arbor church, and we have different churches around the nation and world. And I joined the church in 2018 as a leader. I would say maybe functionally, I'm something close to maybe a deacon in that there is a lot of leadership. I've done many things in my church. I've led Bible studies. I'm on the executive team leadership. I lead women's ministry. I lead our church's media team. So if there's something in the church, there's a good chance I've probably touched it. So we're a pretty small group, but mighty. These are some pictures of different gathering spaces that we had or different events that we've done and to kind of engage our community around us. And yeah, I would say my favorite Black space, if left to my own devices, I would say my mom's house, or I would say, a family gathering or Black church. I think those are spaces that I really enjoy, but I was trying to think of what's like a physical space that I really enjoyed. And this is one space I really, that I've enjoyed. This is a place called Instituto Black Bom. This is in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And basically it's a space kind of to celebrate and have and highlight different like Afro-Brazilian expressions of creativity. And I think what I like about this space, spatially, I like how it's like right on the street edge. So it's very visible and many people can see it from the outside. It's almost kind of like a lantern when people look into it. But also as a gathering space, I love it because there's just a lot of different people, very multi-generational. And also at the time that I was there for an event, they were honoring this well-known Afro-Brazilian actress. I wish I knew her name, but I do not, and my Portuguese is but a few words. But I really enjoyed, that just having a space where, despite me not knowing Portuguese and that I couldn't verbally interact with a lot of people, I felt very at home and I felt very welcomed in this space. And I think I was really excited to see like Blackness outside of an American context too. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. I mean, we could end there, but we're not. So we do have a few questions, and I'm going to start with Reverend James Setta, because I know you have to take off a little bit early. So in thinking about making a way out of no way, as Dr. Dotson was talking about, in this space of resourcefulness, can you share about how you've been resourceful with your church? Some examples, and it's redesigned with Molo Village.
Okay. Yes, our church, as you can tell, was a historic church. And we suffered with a lot of environmental challenges. We had a child that had lead paint poisoning, we had molding, we had just water. And so what we ended up doing was relocating to a storefront so that we could continue to do ministry and mission in our community. And it was estimated that we needed about $1 million in order to, at a minimum, to renovate our church. And so we entered into a program with the United Church of Christ Church Building and Loan Fund. And they put together a team to help us so that we could discern what we were going to become. And so what we ended up doing, because we were fortunate enough to own a city block, we sub-parceled the land and decided to create this new building, the Village at West Jefferson, so that we could continue to do the mission work that we were doing in our community. We do reentry, we do recovery, we have after school programming, we have senior adults, we have job training. We have all of those pieces and parts that we knew that it was important for us to continue to provide in our community. And we needed a space in order to be able to do that. And so we do it here in this new 30,000 square foot building, but we also do it in our storefront property, a storefront church. So we set it up so that it's multi-purpose. Even though our historic church, and I call it a museum because of the way that it's set up, we wanted to make sure that our property was multifunctional because of the type of work that we do. But we also work in a community that has a lot of transient folk. And because they are transient, their idea of what the church represents is through the lens of the work that they are, the service that they are receiving, not so much through the rituals that the traditional church has. And so we wanted to create a space where we could worship, but more importantly, be the hands and feet of God in our community. And so we created our space to function in that way.
Yeah, how large is your congregation?
Our congregation, believe it or not, is about 75 to 100 active members. We, I know it's amazing. Now we have about 250 people on the roll, but as far as being active, we have about 75 members on a good day. And we're just getting back to that level now after COVID. But we operate by a ministry team. We have a core group ministry team that has been together since 2007. And so the bulk of the work is done through this ministry team, but also the United Church of Christ provided us with the technical support that we needed in order to be able to develop our space, but also to do a business plan and also strategic plan so that we knew where we had started, but we also have an idea now of the direction that we want to go in our community. But all of this was done, designed so that we could meet the needs of the people in our community. This building that was constructed is the first new development on our street in over 30 years. And so this was a tremendous win for our community that had been underserved for such a long period of time. And that part of the preparation for this was to understand and to communicate with the people in our community as to what they thought that they needed. So many times what happens is we come to our idea of what the community needs. And this time we did it where we had participated in community meetings where they actually said, this is what we need. This is what we want you all to become so that it will be more beneficial to the community. And so with all of the stakeholders present at the table, this is what we created. But it was also knowing what was lacking in our community, because we did not have a sit-down family restaurant. We did not have a financial institution. We had an ATM machine, but we didn't have a full service branch. We didn't have Head Start, adequate Head Start facility. We did not have a business incubator for Black and brown businesses so that they could thrive. We did not have a health clinic. And so our goal was to put missional partners in this facility that would first of all, have our Christian principles, but also be willing to do the hard work in helping and empowering our community so that they could thrive and become better. The other thing that I want to say about this new building also, the Partners in Vision program that we participate in, it was recognizing that churches might have bricks and mortar, but not the financial sustainability to do ministry and mission in their community. And so this building was designed not only to do mission, but also to be an income stream to support the church so that we could do the renovations that we needed in order for us to return back to the historic church from our temporary setting. And so this year, we are in the process now of beginning the renovations to the historic church so that we can come back home. So it met both needs.
Reverend, thank you so much for sharing. I know you have to go soon. Two quick questions. When you first began to envision and dream about this, how many members did you have then? And what does MOLO mean?
When we first began to envision, that was when the projects were still standing. So we probably had about 150 people who were coming to 2 services. and but they were not committed members. They were attending church, a lot of them. And so I would still go back to this number of 75 to 100 members that are committed to participating in the active ministry. And Molo means welcome home. When I was in South Africa in 2008, I went over for HIV/AIDS mission, as well as race conciliation. And I went to a lady's house who had been infected with HIV for about 14 years. I was one of two Black missionaries in this group, and I walked in the house. And as you can see, I have gray hair, have always had gray hair, a gray crown, as I call it. And I walked in and she grabbed me and she started to weep and she said, "Molo, mama, Molo." And I did not understand what that meant at that time. But when I asked later on, she said, I found out that it meant welcome home, mama. And that stuck with me. And that's what we want for people in our community, to know that whatever the journey they have found themselves on, they are welcome to come home, and so that they can become who God has called them to be. And so for us, the Molo Village and the church, even though they are two distinct institutions, they are a part of the same institution, and that is we are all a part of the body of God, and so we operate in that manner, and we want everybody, whether you come into Molo Village, whether you come into the church, that you are welcome to be here in order to become who God has called you to be.
You had mentioned you established a strategic plan.
Yes.
How inclusive was that? I mean, did it include the ministries that you have on the way now, or you sort of grew the ministries as a part of that plan?
It includes all of the ministries from the very beginning. Molo has 5 programmatic thrusts. We call them villages. It is the Isuduku village, which is our seniors, senior adults. We have the Restored village, which is our people who are in recovery, as well as those who are returning, returning to society from being in prison. We have the Future village, which is our children and youth, and we do out of school enrichment and academic tutoring with them. We have the Healthy village, where we make referrals to for mental health as well as physical health for residents in our community, and we partner with the public health department to do testing and all of those different pieces and parts. And then we have the Empowered village, which is this building, the village at West Jefferson, which is economic development, but we also do job training. And so all of those pieces and parts have been a part of this ministry since 2011. And so that is what is a part of our strategic plan. But our goal was to figure out how to expand those particular programs, not particularly to add on to them, because we think that we have an overarching plan, our overarching focus for each group of people. And so our goal was to figure out how to expand those programs so that we could meet the needs of more people. Our goal is to provide a holistic approach to helping the entire family. And so these 5 programs, we believe, do that.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Ferguson. So I want to share 2 things just for the sake of time. If you have any question that we can't get to, just write it down. They're in your network now, right? They're your family. So we can toss any more detailed questions to them and they will definitely get right back to you. I want to toss the next question to Damar, and thinking about the work you're doing in Watts, right? And so the same thought of resourcefulness, you're working with a community at large on a very, very unique project, but it's uniquely rooted in bringing out their heritage so that it's on display, right? As Sarah was talking about, what does it look like in place, you know? So can you talk about how you've been resourceful and working with the neighbors and working with policy, and working with municipalities to get this off the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started fundraising for this, well, first of all, the property is owned by a woman named Miss Janine Watkins. Her and her family has been in Watts for over 50 years. And so they have strong roots there. Her husband is the director of the largest nonprofit in Watts. Her father-in-law was the founder of that same nonprofit, had his name over everything in Watts. So I knew that this was, isn't just any resident. So we had to get some money. So I was still in my thesis, and I put a goal of like 100,000 to raise that money by the time I was done with school. I think I graduated with like 6,000 in the tank. But by the time we ended, which was just last year, we reached our funding goal, which we ended up having to up to right under 300,000. So to get that money, especially at that time, I had no experience. We got creative. We're in the neighborhood to first have everyone have an aligned vision of what they wanted that space to be and wanted it to look like, wanted programming to be. I don't know if I was clear about this before, but right now no one lives there. The property owner lives down the street. She just bought that house because she just had plans for it. So we're turning it into a ADU, which will allow for residents to come in and stay there. And the residents, we mean like an art residency. So people can come stay there, learn about Watts, and stay there for 3 to 6 months. And all they need to do is leave something for Watts at the end of their residency. And then we're also making a maker space that will allow for the community to learn how to design and as Reverend Doctor was speaking to before, have a community that we can teach to or empower to make money off of their own creative skills. So it's been tough. We first started through like crowdsourcing, and then I was designing clothes, selling those. Then I started getting a little buzz in magazines and articles, and kind of just snowballed into our fundraising goal. And in terms of finding those characteristics to celebrate, it was pretty easy. And that's another reason why my mom's is my favorite BlackSpace. The majority of the things that I brought in are things that I would either see as a kid, or I can go down there now and still see. I can still smell hot combs. I know what that smell like, and I know how it feel, so I'm like, how do we put that how do we make this smell that only we will have a nose for, and bring this type of thing to our design? How do we celebrate the little weird curls in our hair, and how do we bring that to surface? So I don't know, I hope I answered your questions. I'm trying to not be too long-winded, but if you have any other, of course.
Thank you, Damar. We're going to toss the next question over to Sarah. One of the things that Reverend Dr. James Setta brought up was like the needs in the community that she was a part of. one thing that I think sometimes is hard to reconcile is why should we prioritize something like architecture or design or aesthetic when in our communities we have, many other issues that we could address. So why would it be important for us as a Black community to focus on design or space making? And then also, can you talk about a little bit about the future? You mentioned the 5 tenets of church design, but in our conversations, you mentioned kind of the future of church spaces are shared, and like, can you talk a little bit more about what you found through your research about sharing space and how does that work? What might we learn about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I would say principally, good design is enriched through diversity. Like having different people, having different communities, and having different groups of people contribute to the built environment is going to make for like a good world. Like that's something that, like as a baseline, having those different voices, those different experiences, people from different backgrounds designing, will make for better spaces and like will respond to people better. It'll help people more. It plays a role in kind of facilitating some of like the people and human interactions that we have. So that's like one perspective that I have, and especially as I was sharing earlier, that there's not a lot of licensed Black architects. There's not a lot of Black people working architecture, but knowing that design is better because there's like a diverse amount of voices, having thinking about the Black aesthetic and thinking about Black space inherently will contribute to like our society in a better way. I would also say from a more like Christological perspective, like, put a little church hat on, if we as Christians believe that we are made in God's image, and like all people who are made in God's image are created in different ways, it's expressed in different ways, cultures are expressed in different ways. Then the natural next step is that we need to create and we need to build and we need to design as a way to kind of demonstrate God more clearly through our unique cultural lenses that we have and that perspective that we have. So I think in general, it's important that there are Black creatives. It's important that there are Black spaces that have that multiplicity of spaces so that not only can it better serve us and Black people that we're serving, but there are also many times that there are things that advance things for like Black Americans that have a greater impact on other people. And one very clear example is like the civil rights movement. Part of that movement was led through like a portion of the Black church that led that forward. And that came as a result of a lot of different, there are many different things that came out of it, but one of it is that there's like more rights, more legislation that came that benefit people who don't look like us. So I think that's some reasons I think why it's important to have physical building spaces. And maybe like from another perspective, there are many times that not to like put it in the context of like only generational wealth, but there are many times that like Black people, it's not uncommon that we've had spaces that we don't own, we have ownership of, in terms of like, we use this space, we activate this space, we're involved in it. But even where I'm at in Detroit, despite being a Black city where 77% of the city is Black, in terms of home ownership, it's a abysmally small number for African Americans. And because of that, there's a lot of ways that against their will, there can be Black people who get moved to other places when their cities and different areas get bought out. So there's also another thing of, if we want to value Black space and have that gathering where we can serve the immediate community around us, that it's important to have that space so that there's a little more security, knowing that, the rug won't be taken up underneath us. So hopefully I can, if there's any other questions on that, I would hope so, I can elaborate if need be. In regards to some of my research, been talking about, the different typologies of church in different periods in time, and thinking about, okay, what's the move for the current Black church? Like what is the typology that makes the most sense for where we are in this unique moment? And I think kind of where I landed on was having like a shared church context. And even as I was talking about different church typologies that grew in different periods of time, I think one that that was maybe a bit of like a blessing of a curse is that kind of like post the civil rights movement, there was a greater growth of like Black mega churches that appeared, especially as there's more like upper mobility that a lot of Black and African Americans had. With that came with a lot of great resources, and that like now even more so for what we were already doing, like the church is a recording studio, the church is a school where people get their K-12 education. You know, some of these things that have already been happening, and there's just more resources that come with that. But I think a sacrifice that can come with that is from a spatial perspective, entering into like a huge church space, like an arena sized church space. It's very easy as a person to kind of come in and come out and not really interact with other people. So there's a vertical interaction between like me and God, but like the horizontal of interacting with your community, interacting with the person on your left and right, which the Black church has like is one of the strengths of the Black church. I think that's something that can get lost on the scale of a megachurch. So it's not bad, but it's just that, you know, that's a typology that, you know, there's different trade-offs that come with it. So when thinking about what is the next move for the Black church and thinking about like, you know, what type of typology makes sense, having some sort of shared church complex, where one way this kind of articulates is that it could be one space where there are multiple churches kind of meeting in the same area. Some of their individual like ecclesiastical worship spaces they have as their own, but some of the shared spaces in terms of like a fellowship hall or where children's church happens, that can be some points where that you can have some intermingling between some of the different congregations, and also kind of interacting with the communities that are around there. I think also kind of in that, not only kind of breaking down the big scale of like a big church, because in this context, in theory, there's a lot of people who are still coming to the space, but there's still some more of that broken down where you have to interact with your neighbor, or you talk to someone that you haven't seen before. It's a lot harder to kind of slip in and slip out. But also, I think that also brings opportunities when thinking about kind of what James Seta was talking about having resources or having a way that the church can fund itself, and using it as the church can be rented out, or different ways that can benefit the community. One kind of small instance of how that's happening now, for my church, we actually have been renting with a historic Black congregation that's been here in the city of Detroit for like decades. But you know, their congregation isn't that big, and our church is also I think we're small but mighty. I think in terms of people that come out on a Sunday, we might have 15 on a good day. But in terms of people that we're engaged with, it's probably close to 50. So, you know, there's some different things that are there. So there have been times that we rent some space with a Black church that's there. Although our congregation is like ethnically diverse, we still kind of rent and are able to use that space not only for like the Sunday gatherings, but like our gatherings that happen during the weekday, and also just for some storage that we have for some of the worship supplies that we have. So that, I mean, that's like one example of like the shared church space. And with that has also come great opportunities where there's been some kind of overlap between some of the two churches. So there's been a couple times that like our pastor, who's a Korean American male, was preached at their church, which is like a predominantly Black congregation. So culturally, some of the preaching was a little different, but so, you know, there's some times that like we have some, you know, our pastors, we may swap once in a while. Our church for the past 2 to 3 years have done a trunk or treat at the parking lot of that church that we rent from. And I know we've had conversations about having the church, the other church is called Greater King Solomon, having Greater King Solomon have a trunk or two to participate in the trunk or treat. So that's in terms of like use of space and kind of the value of having a space and having those opportunities to have not only like income to support the mission, but also to partner with other people, partner with other followers in the faith on the mission that they're doing, or other people in the community that maybe might not identify as Christian, but it's a great opportunity to be able to give back and love for the community there. Hopefully that helps to answer that.
Oh yes, thank you so much. So the last question I'm going to toss to Dr. Dotson. Can you talk about, you've done these really, really large projects across the country. What kinds of pre-development resources do you notice are necessary to engage in those types of builds and that type of dreaming and engaging? I think you're on mute.
Trying to come up with some kind of manner where people feel that they have voice, that everyone feels that they have agency and that they have a vested interest in whatever is being proposed or what is, and so that essentially it becomes their idea, becomes the community's idea as opposed to design professionals' idea is the primary, and that is done through creation of advisory council. I worked on one large former public housing development, and we formed block clubs, and within those block clubs we had small meetings in people's apartments, as opposed to having some great big meeting in a large room with 200 or 300 people there. And we solicited information from just a handful of people, because in a small setting, oftentimes people feel more comfortable offering their suggestions and their thoughts rather than raising their hand in a room of scores of people. And so we had 177 meetings early on, pre-design meetings, in order to assure that people had voice. And then we came back to the larger group and shared the concerns or the desires that were expressed by people in small groups. And we also worked with children in a similar manner, and that worked very well. So I think it's just a matter of trying to come up with systems where people feel that they have voice and that they have agency in their community. I hope I'm not frozen out again. I'm sorry, earlier I was kicked out on my end. It wasn't. So I just, with the silence, I didn't know if there's anyone.
No, I think, yeah, you're not frozen on my end. I don't know. You might be frozen.
I think Denise is muted. Maybe she's responding, but she's muted.
Yeah, sorry, we were on mute this time. We're dealing with a lot of tech. We're trying to make this work. But no, everyone's responses have just been so beautiful and robust, and just thank you so much.
Today.
Yeah, if that doesn't feel good on a Sunday morning, okay. So as we prepare to let them all log off, I know Sarah's got to get to church. Damar needs to go back to sleep. Olin has another presentation. Does anyone have one or two reflections or questions that they want to ask right now?
If I could just share with them. I could just share with everyone who participated on this morning. We greatly appreciate you getting up all kinds of, I don't know if the sun is up for D yet, but we appreciate you rocking with us, man. And each one of you have massive projects you could be devoting the intellectual energy to have an opportunity for us to meet you and to get to speak with you. We are so indebted to you, so grateful for it. We look forward to reaching out to you in the future through BlackSpace and developing even our own relationships. As I think you can tell by us being up, it's still early over here. Don't get it twisted. It's early over here too. But that we are serious about the life of our ministry and about the impact we can have in the community. And I thank you all. Being here now also, I think, gives us a shot of inspiration and even comfort, knowing that we are not on this journey by ourselves, that there are others who are ahead of us, and we pray to develop testimony that we can share with each of you at some point in time about how your words, how your intellect, how your imagination, your own drive helped us, and hopefully that can help you at a future moment. So thank you so much for being here with us. We so greatly appreciate it. We are praying for each and every one of y'all and the work that you're doing today and moving forward.
Thank you.
Do you all have any other questions or thoughts? You got them on speed dial through with us, so we are just so happy that we were able to share this space together. Yeah, I'm like, yes, my synapses are firing. I'm like having so many ideas, really rooted in, you know, practical nature. You know, you all have really, like, the made a way out of no way is coming through, so it's really beautiful. So I think the speakers can log off, and then we'll just share next steps basically together. So thank you again. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you,
y'all.
church.
Thank you, Alicia.
Bye, y'all. Miss y'all. Bye.